Hi, this is Rick from For Community, creating community spaces so you can connect with others and also with God. Christmas is very soon, and my kids are getting excited. My youngest is getting most excited. One Christmas memory that I can't seem to shake, no matter how many years goes by, is the memory of spending Christmas in the hospital with my oldest, my son. He got sick the week leading up to Christmas, and so because he was sick, he stopped eating, and unfortunately, he also stopped drinking, and that was really where the big problem was. It was bad. I went to 2 emergency rooms in 2 different cities to get him help before he got checked into a hospital. We were in there for a few days. My wife brought him a couple of Christmas presents into the hospital. She just kind of visited, brought a couple of Christmas presents. We could open them when he felt well enough to do that. And it was a rough time, and it sticks out in my memory as a really bad time for us. However, if you were to ask my son, he has a very different memory. For him, he remembers it as the time he was allowed to eat all the popsicles that he wanted. He got new toys. He never had to get out of his bed. And there was a really big perk for him. He got his own TV. He was just a little guy. He had his own TV. He remembers that the TV was on a swivel arm attached to the wall, and he could bring it right over to his bed. He watched any show that he wanted. I'm not sure what channels they had, but it was on the kids' floor, so it was only kids' shows. And he remembers it as a not too bad time. Actually, it's a very exciting time. He and I have very different memories of this occasion. What about you? What memory do you constantly have around Christmas that always comes back to you every single year? If you're watching with someone, please pause the video and share your Christmas story. This video is based on my interpretation of Luke chapter 2, verses 1 through 7. In this passage, we see a baby weaker than what my son was when he was in the hospital, in conditions that were far less glamorous. We see Jesus born and lying in a manger on the very first Christmas day. Luke chapter 2, verses 1 through 7. At that time, the Roman Emperor Augustus decreed that a census should be taken throughout the entire Roman Empire. All returned to their own ancestral towns to register for the census. And because Joseph was a descendant of King David, he had to go to Bethlehem in Judea, David's ancient home. He traveled there from the village of Nazareth in Galilee. He took with him Mary, to whom he was engaged, and who was now expecting a child. And while they were there, the time came for her baby to be born. She gave birth to her firstborn son. She wrapped him snugly in strips of cloth and laid him in a manger because there was no lodging available for them.
You shall not pass.
Why?
Because you kids need to watch Connect HQ.
We already did, see?
Oh yeah, you did. Good job.
You may cross the path.
Good thing we watched Connect HQ.
Yeah.
Roughly, give or take, about 2,000 years ago, a miracle happened. God opened a zipper in the fabric of our reality and stepped into it and came into it as a person. He entered it as a baby. This really happened. This is a real historical calendar event. Here's the point that I'm going to try to make in this video. Jesus came infinitely vulnerable to make us infinitely powerful. The part in this story that's really jumping out to me this season is the manger. I mean, yeah, the story is absolutely about Jesus, but the story is placed in a context. And the context for the person of Jesus is within a manger. A manger is kind of like an animal feed box. It's not the bed of God. It's not the bed of a king. It's the bed of someone who has no resources and needs a hand. When I consider the manger, I consider the idea of infinite vulnerability. Jesus didn't come in power. He came in vulnerability. He didn't come to take away any power or autonomy that you have or I have. He came vulnerable so we could receive power and autonomy from him and access him. Before I go any further, let's just talk about relationships for a moment, because that tends to be where I hang out most of the week as I'm working with couples in couples counseling. I like the role of vulnerability in relationships. I mean, I think we need to use it wisely. I don't think it's wise to be completely open and vulnerable with people that have no personal connection or commitment to us. That's not good. But with people who have a personal connection and are very committed to you, like a spouse, vulnerability is very powerful. It's very useful and helpful. Vulnerability lets your spouse know that there's someone else in the relationship. Vulnerability helps your spouse to understand what your needs are and how they're not getting met and how they can be met. It's deep honesty to another person that reveals where a need isn't being met, and you really hope that they would like to meet it for you. When I consider the manger, I consider Jesus' position of infinite vulnerability. And that tends to be very different than the way people tend to think about God coming into the world or interacting with the world at all. People tend to think of God as a source of all the wrong in the world, like floods and famines and natural disasters. Why would God let bad things happen to good people? When we ask questions like that, we think of a God who is all-powerful and distant and only wants to use his power for his own purpose. But that's not what we see in the manger. In the manger, we see a very different side of God. He comes to us powerless. He comes to us accessible. He's not using his power to keep himself distant from us. He's actually surrendering his power for our sake so that we can access him and not fear being restricted and not fear being punished, not fear the wrath of God. He can't keep us away from him because he chose to come in vulnerability. The story after this one is the story of the shepherds, which really highlights the idea of infinite vulnerability. Jesus is so vulnerable that a group of filthy men who were total strangers were able to access a room where a mom just gave birth. They just busted into it in the most uncharming way. I mean, these guys didn't even bring gifts like the wise men did. Jesus has no power to restrict someone from reaching out to connect with him. Jesus chose infinite vulnerability so that we can access him through simple faith. In couples therapy, I do some work around attachment. So let's just talk about attachment so we understand the role of infinite vulnerability in us reaching out to God. I often see couples who have this pursuer-withdrawer dynamic. One partner has an anxious attachment and is hypersensitive to the health of the relationship. So there's a constant checking in to make sure the other person is still on board and in the relationship with them. Another partner is avoidant and tends to shrink away from behavior that looks too emotional or too probing. When the pursuer probes the withdrawer too hard, the withdrawer shells up and becomes a turtle. The pursuer responds with an increased level of emotion and a louder voice, and many, many, many more words spoken way too fast for the withdrawer to cope with it. The pursuer-withdrawer dance just keeps the couple in their own little dance routine that sees them working themselves up but never getting anywhere near their relationship goals. Jesus doesn't offer us that kind of dance. There is no pursuer-withdrawer here. For those of us who are pursuers, for those of us who want to know what God is up to, for those of us who want to know why there's bad in the world, for those of us who want to know why it looks like God doesn't care, God's answer to those of us who are turning up the volume with our emotions, like anger and frustration, lack of forgiveness towards him, whatever that pursuit looks like to you, Jesus meets us with his vulnerability. He came in a manger and became infinitely vulnerable so that you can reach him, so that you can access him, so that you can connect with him, so that you can experience how much he loves you. What Jesus really wants, what would meet his need, is a relationship with you. He came to connect with you. It's okay to start your journey toward God with some anger. He won't drive you away. He'll receive you. He can't stop you. He didn't come to us to take control of the world. He came to us to give control of the world back to us. And that control comes as we love Jesus and as we love each other. As we learn to better love each other, we learn to better manage the earth and take care of each other. And this place gets better and better through the path of love. When I see this particular story, I see the manger. On the one hand, we have the emperor, all-powerful, all authority, forcing every citizen to do something that's really a problem for them. He's not making anyone's life better. He's not sharing his power. He's not sharing control. He's not offering a relationship with himself. This is an administrative power play. The emperor wanted to expand the empire, and that took money. So this is about a powerful man wanting more power and taking the little power that his people had to make himself more powerful. That's totally not God. That is totally not Jesus. On the one hand, we see a power broker. On the other hand, we see a manger and a baby laying within it who is infinitely vulnerable by choice, coming to give power back to you, coming to empower you to take care of others and take care of this world, coming to bring you closer in relationship with the greatest source of power and resources, and then freely offering it to you as an inheritance. On the one hand, there's a powerful person chasing more power. On the other hand, there's an infinitely vulnerable God offering us his power so we can do better for each other, by each other, and our planet, and have an eternity to look forward to. If you want to know why bad things happen in this world, it's probably best to look at the emperor in this passage rather than the baby in the manger. If you want to know what the solution is, it's probably best to look at that baby in the manger, not the emperor on the throne. I started by sharing a story about my son in the hospital over Christmas. Okay, so I didn't tell you the whole story, and there's a good ending here. On Christmas Eve, one of the doctors happened to be walking around and checking in on the patients. So the doctor gave us the release, and we were able to go home on Christmas Eve. We got home, he slept in his own bed, and woke up on Christmas morning and did the whole Christmas thing with us. I really appreciate that doctor. He chose to be on that shift. He chose to be away from his family. He chose to leave the people that he loved most in order to visit my son and let him go back home. That's kind of like Jesus. Jesus left all his glory and power so that he can be with us. He made himself accessible to us so that we can be given a clean bill of health and be put back on track. Put on a track of love for God and each other. And a path of love and relationship is exactly what this world needs. I hope you can see that it's what you need too. So that's my interpretation of this text, how it's jumping out to me this season. I'm really looking forward to hearing yours this week on Sunday, 10:30 a.m. or 6 p.m. on Zoom this week. That's it from me to you for now. Would you please like? Would you please share? Would you please subscribe? Would you please also ask for the link so that you can come and connect and we could all share the open mic together as we talk about this text. If you'd like to contribute, you can find the link down in the show notes below for community, creating community spaces so you can connect with others and also with God. See you next time, and Merry Christmas.